It's another Manly Monday. This Manly Monday, we're talking about inherent worth and men. I am recovering from being sick. I'm not all there still. I may cough. I'm on my fourth box of Kleenex in as many days. I'm better than I was on Thursday and Friday, but I will cough. But here we go. If you like this content, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K to help people get individualized attention to work on these issues. And again, disclaimer, yes, all types of people have trouble with self-worth. This is tailored towards the specific cultural challenges that men have in this regard. Because men, more than women, are judged and judge themselves based on, the status of their careers, what they can produce. I'll get into my sort of seesaw theory of the gender binary where there's no better or worse in these things. It just fucks up everybody differently. Inherent self-worth, or a sense of inherent worth as a human, is a really difficult concept if you're not brought up with it. Because if you're not raised with it, how do you know how to feel it? How do you know what it is? I see this a lot in clients. And the bulk of my clients are men. And I do find, and I thought this was interesting because I have a bad habit of sort of batting away or minimizing compliments. But with women clients, overall, they're a lot more receptive to the nicer comments. And it took me some time in working with some clients to understand the mechanics of why it's so hard for men and me. Boys are set an example that men are defined by their achievements. Now, I was raised like a boy, so I got that. It's not about you're good as you are, you matter as you are, you're always gonna have a place, just do your best. It was achieve, or else, right? And in my case, that was overt by my father. In some cases, it's not. Children seek approval from the adults that take care of them. And if the adults around you only praise you when you do something good, right? As opposed to sitting with you and talking with you when something's up, you get that sense that only what you can provide, only what you can produce matters. And a lot of people, me, who don't get the approval they want at home, do it through school grades or sports achievements. There was an ongoing joke when I was in middle school and high school when guys I went to school with, they'd see my grades and go, my God, if I got those grades, my dad would buy me a car. I said, what do you get when you get home? And I said, where's the other 2 marks? That happened. I got 98% in something. I got where's the other 2 marks? And then, of course, when I struggled in grade 11, all of a sudden I got an 89 on something, and oh boy, yeah, an 89 is still an A, bordering on an A plus. When I think about it, it was messed up, right? But I didn't know it was messed up, right? You can't know that your home environment is not what it's supposed to be because you only have one, right? Unless you happen to be, you know, going between parents, and that gets its own challenge because sometimes kids get put in the middle of their parents not getting along. And so they feel like they need to hide stuff from both parents so the parents don't fight over something the kid told them. The other thing, when there are problems at home and kids are going to school walking wounded, they get branded weird or creepy. And this is one of the reasons I'm so anti-creepy when it comes to, that whole, oh, he's creepy. And I use the word creepy sometimes. I just have a very, very high bar for it. I don't think someone being awkward is creepy. I find it kind of adorable, right? Creepy to me implies a certain menace or a sense you're not safe around the person, not just somebody's awkward. And, growing up, most of my friends were guys until 7th or 8th grade, and that was weird. You weren't allowed to do that anymore. But, back in high school around grade 10, we were all like, whatever. We went back to mixed groups again because we were like, fuck this. But boys are more likely to express hurt or sadness as anger, especially in that period between 15 or 18 where physiologically there's a reason for this. So, neglectful, abusive, or invalidating homes get missed. Fun fact, you also see this with, teen black girls and non-white kids or kids raised in poverty, girls or non-binary people. But, those are anomalous. You see it across the board in boys. And by anomalous, I don't mean it's bad. I mean, there are reasons for that, and this is a focus on men's video. Just full disclosure, because I know some people check the data on these videos I make, and I'd hate for them to find something and make me think that I was leading them astray. I'm not. There's only so much you can put in. Because, 15 to 18, this is when some boys are doing it as young as 12 now. But this is when boys, young men, whatever you want to call teenagers, this is when they start finding the manosphere, right? We didn't have the same access back when I was a teenager. Now it's available through the internet. Their friends show them things. The thing about the manosphere, and the reason I am so... concern's a loaded word. The reason I think it's bad for men, not just bad for men, not misogynistic, bad for men. The manosphere keeps repeating the idea that the world doesn't care about men, that the world treats men as disposable. And that is speaking to that lack of worth that these young men who are struggling feel. It's the same thing that radical feminist groups on college campuses say to young women. I was there. I know. It sounds exactly the same. I remember when I first encountered the Manosphere, I'm like, holy shit, this is radical feminism with the pronouns reversed. Here's the thing. The world is not a thing that cares about anyone. The world is too big. What makes a person feel like they have inherent worth is supportive environments that people can see and touch and talk to and interact with. And some men have supportive environments that treat them as if they have inherent worth, and some don't. That's not the world. That's the direct social circle. All types of science, psychology, anthropology, sociology, medical science, we see it over and over and over again. The direct social environment is the thing that matters. And the thing about men especially is that invalidating childhoods, the real core of a lack of sense of self-worth. You don't have to have been abused. You just have to have been neglected or invalidated. This often stems from intergenerational trauma. And I've been having conversations lately with multiple men who are hesitant to engage in therapy or pursue a path of healing because they don't want to throw their dad under the bus or their parents under the bus. And that's the thing about intergenerational trauma. It's intergenerational for a reason. Your parents can be good people, and that's still passed on because there are a lot of good people with unresolved trauma. And that matters. The reason it's unique for men is because granddad or great-granddad got drafted in some war or other, got a shit deal that way, either in his service or after. He got bitter, possibly picked up, PTS or some kind of substance abuse problem. He passed that attitude on to his son, who passed that attitude on to, the grandson and the great-grandson. And boys worship their fathers. It is a thing. And, until they can't. And supportive mothers can't cancel out an actively bad paternal role model. If there's no paternal role model, then, you can do big brothers, you can have mentors. One of the things I think is so really not good about this, parents' permission in all things or else, is that non-familial men aren't taking those first steps because they don't want to get sued, they don't want to complain, they don't want to get fired. And so boys without a father figure don't get one, and boys with a bad father figure, you know what happens in those situations. Anybody tries to mentor the kid. What are you doing? That's my kid. I was the child of a guy that did that. I know it from firsthand experience. Whenever somebody's referring to their child as property, it's a warning sign. And this is part of the reason why I don't think miserable couples should stay together. Because even good dads, when a marriage is unhappy, that passes on. Kids don't understand what's happening. Kids get signals that they think are them. And this undermines the kid's sense of self-worth because mom's sad, dad's angry, it must be me. And parents are very, very distracted when a marriage is falling apart. And this is no one's fault. This just is. A marriage that's breaking down is heartbreaking for everyone involved. But staying in something, claiming it's for the kids, there's just no evidence to prove that, right? Miserable people don't raise happy kids. And, because kids blame themselves for the misery. Now, is that saying parental alienation doesn't exist? Oh, no. Parental alienation is real. Now, the parents can be living under the same roof, and one parent can attempt to alienate the other parent. Welcome to my childhood again. And it's awful. In a perfect world, it should not happen. I don't think that, again, the Manosphere tactics have been really good at addressing parental alienation, because it presents this caricature of what it is, as opposed to really advocating to spot the signs. In the work I do, a lot of clients are going to kind of groan. There are certain words and certain phrases I will challenge every single time. Should is one of them. I knew they were going to is another. Should is sometimes fair. Kids should always get validation from their parents. Even if they don't like what they do, they can validate that, they still love them, they still care about them. There just has to be accountability for actions, right? Should doesn't mean it always happens. And the problem with saying that in a vacuum is that young people go, well, what's wrong with me that I didn't have that? And that's the opposite of the intended message. But that's where a lot of people in those environments end up feeling. The thing about I knew he was going to, it's like, how did you know he was going to? If somebody said, well, it happens every single time I bring this up. Okay, do you know why? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Again, it doesn't mean it's never real. It's just something that requires challenge, because it can be the sign of a cognitive distortion. And cognitive distortions wreak havoc on people's sense of self-worth, their self-esteem, their self-confidence, and their relationships. And these are learned in the home. I mean, I was in that, blue collar, you ain't gonna amount to nothing, get used to it bubble. I mean, God, we used to go to school. I remember in the 10th grade, like 3 classes in a row, lectured us about the aging population and how there were going to be no jobs for us because the baby boomers weren't retiring. And it's like, I look back on it now. And we're just preparing kids for the world. What were you thinking? They wonder why kids went to school and got drawn into Marxist frameworks. That was priming, right? For an anti-capitalist perspective. What they should have been doing is encouraging entrepreneurship. That was the way around the silver wave. But no. Topic for another day. Because we need to get now to the, well, what happens if you were raised with a bad male role model or no male role model, an invalidating home, a neglectful home, or, if you were abused. There's some catch up that needs to happen. Obviously, you know that, you feel it. All is not lost. The challenge is you do have to forgive yourself for a lot of things, because a childhood like that primes you for really unhealthy relationships with romantic partners, because things you think are normal are not healthy. And that's not your fault. Quite the opposite. It's a re-victimization. Now, to give you some incentive to do the work, I'm going to briefly say, why is this important? Why is self-worth important? If you have to know, right? A sense of self-worth, inherent self-worth, makes mistakes and setbacks easier. It allows you to have hope. It makes it harder for narcissists and other abusers to manipulate you because you trust your gut. Like, this feels wrong. I'm not gonna, and that comes out of actually having boundaries. When you cannot really set boundaries without an inherent sense of self-worth. You can't stop and take time for health and well-being when you feel like you have to constantly produce. And, you end up trusting nobody. And so the wrong people earn your trust because those wrong people are really good. Well, they don't earn your trust. They shortcut it. And they do it because they figure out fairly quickly what things are going to give you that temporary boost, like hope for hope instead of actual hope. And I know a lot of people feel pretty hopeless, and hope is a hard thing to talk about when people are like that. Talk about that with clients a lot. And I don't use the same definition of hope that some people do. I see hope as a series of healthy goals, right? Hope is not, I'm going to win the lottery someday, or I'm going to do this. And that was the hope I had when I was a kid. I had all these, I'm going to show everyone wrong. I'm going to be this big success, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I decided a media career was the way to do it. And you know what? I went out and got that media career, and I was on TV, made it all the way to G4 down in the US. And did it feel like success? Did I feel like I showed everybody, even though I achieved the goals? No, quite the opposite. Because you get treated like shit in the media, but also achievements don't fill that hole. So now what? Right? The idea that you have value no matter what is a combination of self-talk and the talk around you. They have to reinforce each other. It's very important to be in a group where you can say, can you please not say things that way? It bothers me. And have people at least try, like not immediate change. That's not realistic. And that's when someone is grappling for survival. And unfortunately, the mental health industry teaches people wrong that way as well. They think you can blow up and set boundaries right in the moment. Like, no, you're violating my boundaries. Stop it right now. A person has to know the boundary is there. Otherwise, it's not fair to spring it on them that way. It happens, but it's better to, because boundaries should be set away from your limits. So when something's being crossed, you can still stress it calmly. That's what I didn't learn until way down the road. Because you have to be a little bit flexible with boundaries, right? It's like, the screen door that you can open and the screen door is still there, or open the window and the screen's still there. And if your boundary is right at your limit, then you can't. But what are people trained to do? Knock the crap out of themselves for school and knock the crap out of themselves for extracurricular activities and knock the crap out of themselves for things that look good in a college application, and then knock the crap out of themselves for college, and then knock the crap out of themselves in the first job. The hustle, the hustle, the hustle. And at any point, is anybody saying to them, you seem exhausted. What is going on? How do we make this more manageable? No, the system all down the line equates exhaustion, constantly being past your limits, with diligence and responsibility and accountability, and they are the opposite. I say so often in private client sessions, look, your life until you get at a university is a series of sprints. And then all of a sudden it becomes a marathon. There isn't that structure of the school year that you only have to pace yourself, 6 weeks to 3 months ahead. All of a sudden time just freaking dilates. And all those skills that got you to that point are counterproductive, and it sucks. It's not fair that we do that to people. But men have an extra burden there because it is so, culturally, men are the ones that do the asking. Men are the ones that approach. Men are the ones that go out and get what they want. So the minute you stop, you feel, lazy or irresponsible or beta. And, that's why I swear things like fishing and hunting exist, because fishing and hunting are huge amounts of nothing, punctuated by a few minutes of really, really intense activity. But most of the time, it's a bunch of nothing. Like, I remember one person said, why do people go camping? You're paying to do the equivalent of sit out in your backyard, drink beer, and not shower for 3 days. You're paying for the campsite for something you can do in your backyard. It's an excuse to switch off. And I get it. So one is to build self-worth. You have to change how you talk to yourself. And that's really hard without help. And that's something you need a social group, not just a therapist for. And that's what I'm trying to build them. Because you need people that can reinforce, you're a good person and you mean well and you care about people and you are doing the work. I never tell people you're trying hard, because that sounds like you're trying and failing. You're doing the work. You are making steps. It is hard, but you're doing it. And that work matters. That work has inherent value. It doesn't get a paycheck. What it does is it makes sure you're gonna still be around in 10 years. And that matters. I mean, when despair is the state of thinking that people would be happier if you weren't around, or nobody would notice if you weren't around, that is not depression, that is despair. And that is the thing that culture really fails men on, because men don't form those ongoing communication relationships. Where, I have people that something will pop into my head and I'll just reach out and say, hey, something tells me I should check in on you. And sometimes it's nothing. Other times it's something. But you know what? People reaching out and just going, hey, how you doing? That gives someone a feeling of worth, especially men, because, that means they're not the ones chasing for a change. And I think a big disappointment I have in culture is how we devalue platonic friendships that way. Because you need more than one person in your life. Nobody can be everything to someone. Because if there's stuff you don't, too often men don't tell their partners things that they really should. But there are some times where it's just, when men are feeling overburdened by the expectations that come with being a man, it's very hard for their partner to not take that personally. It's easier for someone who, is not that primary romantic relationship to hear that. Because, they're not as interconnected that way. And that is a really hard thing when men are trained to just go after everything 100%. Like, you hear about those guys so often where they get a girlfriend, they disappear from their friend group, and then they come back when they've broken up. You don't hear that in groups of women. You don't. Women stay interconnected with each other, even if there's a boyfriend. Like, yes, they might be spending more time with them, but girls have social license to call each other on that. I watched it happen all the time. And often, the woman wants to bring the boyfriend to things, much to the boyfriend's chagrin a lot of the time. But there's definitely different social dynamics, and I understand I'm being incredibly heteronormative here. It does happen doesn't happen so much in lesbian circles, because then that's just, it's the U-hauling thing. Integration of life instantly. I do see some gay guys kind of drop out when they get a boyfriend. But again, it's sort of the social conventions are different. So this is kind of a men involved with women problem. But that's telling, isn't it? It shows how men are, I won't say wired, taught to behave and just 100% laser focus on things to the detriment of other things going on in their life. And we can do something about that, For men who are already adult, it's a process. And that's why I try to get, people making friends and people getting a community. And man, it's been tough to get it off the ground because there's so many daggers out. And you have to be so careful. But the small steps we've taken have worked. I have seen greater improvements in the clients that participate in the group activities. And I mean, these are really serious cases. They've made incredible strides. I don't think they see it. I see it. As someone who's been there, I see it. But yeah, when there's an extended social group, you get better results than just talking to me. And, me once every week or 2 or 3 in a therapist, some regularity. You need that group. You need different elements of yourself validated in different environments. And it makes sense, right? If one thing goes bad, you haven't lost everything. But also, one person can say things in the way another person can't. One person may get a reference that another person doesn't. Sometimes being challenged by one person when somebody's there so that it, You're not going to be on the ropes. It's not going to get out of hand. That can be very healing for somebody who's been through a lot of abuse or neglect, especially in groups. And it has to be that, inside out biopsychosocial model. Because if anything's missing in that regard, the whole house of cards just falls. And that's the problem with the Manosphere content, right? I recommend turning it off, and I understand why some people aren't gonna. But I recommend turning it off, pick up the Stoics, watch Rocky movies. God, even watch something like Entourage or Suits, for fuck's sake. As much as those shows personally drive me crazy, they're better than a group that says the world doesn't care about you. That's the opposite to what builds a sense of self-worth, which is people going, I'm invested, I care. Little acts of kindness, buying someone a beer, helping someone when they're short a month, listening to them when something's bothering them. You never know what little act can make a person just feel like they matter. And the whole point is you don't have to do it. It makes me laugh when people are like, I know you have to listen to me. I know you have to say these things because that's your job. It's like, no, I'm not a therapist. That's why I always say on my show, I am not a therapist. I have had people not like something I said to them. I don't bullshit and tell people up is down. 'Cause in my world, that will catch up. They will find out and you're fucked. Trust is destroyed. Right? But that's just me. Other people have a different way, and I know my way is not the only right one. There are things I'm still working on myself regarding. Inner Kratos is not always the ideal tool, right? I am trying to develop other things. Inner Kratos is just so dominant. But see, there's a sense of worth, right? Because I name that part of me, and this is the example that we're on the video so you can see where you started. Inner Kratos is the stuff the world told me was shit. You're too aggressive. You don't communicate. You're closed off. You don't let anybody in. You're this, you're that. You're yeah, na, 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 na. And I listened and I tried way too long to try to twist myself into somebody I wasn't to please others. Because, these people were trying to make me better. And I finally determined I like that part of myself. When I played the first God of War game, the first one, not Dad of War, the first one, when he threw himself off a cliff and was like that Hydra fight and yelling at Zeus. Well, it was Ares at first and then Zeus. I was like, that's me. This game understands me. And it understands all the parts of me the world doesn't accept, just rejects. And I went, okay, I like that part of me. I don't want to change the inside there. That's me. Rightly or wrongly, that's me. And it's been so affirming to see the franchise evolve in a way that makes me see other people saw in that character what I saw in him, which is someone who gave their all for a collective cause, the Spartan War, right? And was then discarded. And he had to do these things, people put shit in his head and and made him do a whole bunch of things. And then now, oh, you're bad, you're bad. No context. It's like, now what? And to, see his journey and to see him with Atreus now and all this stuff, that's validating. Especially the series getting called misogynist and all that stuff for years. Disagree. But if you want a video on that, I can do that. But that's no, that's me. That's what I don't want to change. And so one of the things I do with clients is go, what do you love? What is important to you? What things do you connect with? And I work from there, because that's what worked for me. You take this part of you that's sacrosanct, that you can give a name through. It doesn't matter what piece of media. I use superheroes a lot because the MCU is just so well known, but it can be Disney princesses or video games or anime or whatever, Warhammer, anything. And it's like, all right, how do we take that and then, make it God of War Ragnarok Kratos instead of original God of War Kratos, or worse, like God of War Ascension Kratos. That one was real bad. That's the process. That's how you do it. That's how you build that sense of self-worth. This part of me is okay. I have to change my approach in places, but I don't have to change myself. Because these parts of me are good. And it is all trade-offs. It is all right, to make the good changes, you have to do the things that are going to validate you, not invalidate you. And you may be going, what does that mean? We don't have time, but I can talk more about this on Feedback Friday if you want. Until then, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK, or sign up yourself. Link to the forms in the description box below if you want to tackle this stuff, if you want, the first steps toward this. We can put together a plan yourself. Until then, thanks for watching Manly Mondays, particularly long Manly Mondays.